Hi everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast with myself, Chris Tuck, and
I'm Beverley Ann. And hello.
Hello again, everyone. So what is this week's topic of conversation, Beverley?
Well, we're going to be talking about self-harm. And like anything, we love open conversations about subjects that can be quite challenging, but also to look at some of the myths and also, understanding about self-harm, but what we can do when we're in that place that we want to self-harm.
Okay. Very emotive subject, and we just want all our listeners to just take care and just be aware if any of this triggers you, to obviously leave, make yourself feel safe, and reach out to self-help groups, self-help lines if they need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to read out something, and I will be very honest, I'm actually doing a higher qualification at the moment, and it's all about suicide and self-harm. So I've got previous certificates, but I like to keep them up and fresh anyway. What's also really interesting is how language changes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to read out something from the course that I can share, and it's when it starts talking about self-harm, what is self-harm? And self-harm is when an individual physically harms themselves as a way of dealing with very difficult feelings, painful memories, or overwhelming situations and experiences. Now, one of the things we're going to be very careful about here is not glorifying anything, but also not dismissing. So, this is where it's very tricky here. And I say tricky because we're very aware of the topic and the seriousness of it. But for me, one of the things that came to light is, yes, I'm very aware of self-harm. I'm very aware of some of the national figures, which I'm not going to go into. But one of the things that really was highlighted, and I do know through different experiences, that the number of younger people that are self-harming themselves in different ways has grown exponentially. And we're not going to sit here and talk about all the various reasons, but one of the key things that we know anyway is that when we become overwhelmed, when we're unable to verbalize our feelings, our thoughts, we tend to isolate ourselves. So we isolate ourselves internally and everything goes inside, but we also tend to isolate ourselves from people and society. And isolation has a really big physical impact, not just on our mental health, but on our physical health. And one of the figures that came up about isolation is isolation, especially enforced isolation, and we've all gone through that over the last couple of years, is that it's more harmful to our bodies than smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
So I just wanted to get that out there, because this is something that straight away, when we find ourselves isolating ourselves, when we find ourselves, staying in the home, staying in the bedroom, it's not enforced now. But that doesn't mean to say that everybody feels comfortable now about going back into their community and engaging with their friends. And this could be, I'm not saying it is, but it could be one of the factors why there's such an increase in self-harm with younger people.
Yeah. Makes sense, doesn't it? That is increased for that reason.
Yeah. So that's quite an interesting perspective. The other thing is about the word self-harm. I don't know about you, Chris, but for myself, for other people, when you ask them what does self-harm mean to you, because I've been asking a lot of people, we think of people cutting themselves, and that is one. And some people say it's a cry for help. I like to say, actually, because I like to think of communication, it's a cry for support. It's saying there's so much going on inside. I don't know how to verbalise it.
Yeah.
I want support.
Yeah.
Now, as we've spoken in loads of different conversations, there's never a 1, 2, 3 fix and it's done. But if you become aware of somebody harming themselves in that way, don't be frightened by it, but just quietly, just say to them, I see you've hurt yourself. How did that come about? Ask them about it.
Yeah. Often we're very scared to do that though, aren't we? Because when I worked in the psychiatric hospital, I shan't name it, but they used to say, don't bring attention to it because it is a sign of attention seeking. But even back then, and not being a clinician, it didn't sit right with me. And the way that you've explained it does sit right with me. It speaks of, I'm really going through something. I don't know how to verbalize. So please, can someone help me? But they also did say, don't ignore it, but don't bring attention to it. But I think if you ask that individual that's going through that outright, if the conversation goes that way, then it gives them the opportunity, doesn't it, to sort of like share what's going on for them.
And even if they can't find the right words, even if they say, it's all too much for me at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I think this is where it comes on from people wanting to fix. We all want to, if someone's unhappy, the first thing we want to do is change that for them, but we can't. But what we can do is just be there.
And support.
Yeah, be an ear.
The way that they need to be supported or want to be supported.
Absolutely.
That's a hard lesson.
It's a very hard lesson. So for me, if I'm in that situation, I'll sit there quietly, allow them to say what they want. If they're crying, do you want a tissue? Do you want a drink? It's okay to cry because that's a release.
Yeah.
Crying's a release. It's nothing to be scared of. It's like, thank you. It's letting it out. But also, is there anything you would like me to do for you?
Yeah.
They might say no. But then it's okay to say, well, I'm going to check in with you.
Yeah.
In a few days' time. So you're already opening that. You haven't changed anything, but you've given that support to somebody and allowed them that moment. Oh, okay. I have an avenue. I have someone that I have a release.
Yeah.
But there's all different ways of self-harm.
Correct.
And this was really, really interesting because we went into it further. Because self-harm can even be being negligent towards ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not feeding ourselves, overfeeding ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not washing ourselves. Overuse of alcohol. Overuse of drugs. And when I say drugs, I'm talking about prescribed drugs and also other drugs.
Yeah.
Because it's all of a form of medication to try and numb how we feel. So that all comes into self-harm. So again, that's always a hard subject, but be aware. And also, I think it's really important to be aware of support crisis lines. So the Samaritans.
Listening.
So the Samaritans is always a fantastic line to have because it's 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Because if somebody's in that place where they are self-harming and that they've now got you that they can open up to, what if they want to speak to someone at 2 o'clock in the morning? What about 3 o'clock in the morning? But if you've been able to give them a number that they can call, that's part of what I like to call a wellness toolbox, or somebody might like to call it a crisis box. So it's an action that you're giving to enable someone to have support. And I think,
again, it'd be up to them, won't it, to access that or not?
Absolutely. But something that you and I talk about all the time as well is about not disabling somebody.
Yeah. Empowering them.
Empowering them, enabling, allowing them to make their choice, no matter how low they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they've often not been taught that throughout their lives. They've always been disempowered. So wherever you can, even if they're right down, you know, low, down on their knees, literally, you still have to give them that opportunity to feel empowered.
Absolutely. Now we could go on further to suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And that is part of self-harm. Doesn't mean to say that someone's going to complete suicide, but they may have suicidal thoughts. But again, by having the conversation, by being able to have a crisis box or self-care toolbox, again, you're giving choice to somebody who feels that they don't have choice. And that in itself is valuable and it's huge.
I'm not an expert on suicide, Beverley. I've done no courses, but I've had conversations with people. And it's almost like the people that I've spoken to have said, it's almost like the thinking part of their brain is switched off and they're just going with their emotions, how they're feeling or not feeling, you know, they can't reach out. They feel like they're everybody around them is better off without them because they are causing too much trouble or they're too much of a burden. This is how the person that I spoke to or people that I've spoken to have felt. And I'm like, it's almost like if you feel that way, that you've got to have a safe word that you can share with your friends and family, that if you find that you are in that position and you're not thinking straight, because you can't be if you're in that kind of mode of feeling, then if you can remember that one word, that you could just pick up the phone or write it or whatever and just say that word, then everybody knows that it is urgent, that it is life-threatening, and that they can step in and really help you, so that you don't need to say how you're feeling, how you're thinking, but that word means all of that.
And I think that is one good coping mechanism, because I think that's really useful when we come back to self-harm as well, because it's giving you a word to use. That means you don't have to explain anything further. I'm going to quickly touch on this suicide part, and I don't want anyone to worry that's listening. There's one thing straight away, again, when someone's in that place, they feel so low, they feel they don't have any other options.
Yeah.
And it's okay to ask questions, because we think, oh, we're not going to speak about it, because if we do, we'll cause someone to do something. No, completely. That is an absolute myth.
Yeah.
That is an absolute myth. Same as self-harming. We don't cause people to do that because we've opened a conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
So people get scared. Absolutely. So if I'm having a conversation with somebody, and I will say I've done different courses, as I said, and I'm doing another one again now. So it is something that I do regularly, and anyone can have access, and anyone to courses. So anyone interested who's listening to this, contact us, and I'm more than happy to signpost you to a course. But the first question I say to them is, okay, you're feeling suicidal, you've got suicidal thoughts. Is it your life you want to end, or is it how you feel?
Yeah, the pain. Yeah.
And that question in itself you will find that most people will say, it's the pain. I just want everything to go quiet, or I just want to stop feeling this pain.
Yeah.
For some others, they may say, I want to end my life.
Yeah.
And then you ask, and this is scary at first, so how do you plan to end your life? Now, this is when you'll find that most people will not really have clarity on that, and also then again it can frighten them, and then it gives them the opportunity to say, actually, that's not what I really want to do. I'm looking for help. I'm looking for support. I just didn't have the words, but thank you, because you've opened it for me, and it's scary. For somebody that then follows up and says, actually, this is how I want to do it, and this is what I've done, that is then when you can say, well, I'm here with you, you're important, let's go to A&E, or is there somebody that can take you to A&E today?
Yeah.
And even for those people that have been sure of what they've wanted to do, when they've had that opportunity and they've been spoken to afterwards, they'll have told you that they've responded and said, I just didn't know what else to do. And I thought that was my only option, but I'm so glad now retrospectively to see that it wasn't my only option. So we have addressed that, and that wasn't going to be part of the narrative, but you know what we're like. We go with the flow. I want to come back. Let's come back to self-harming anyway, because I think now we've started to talk about this and get some of the myths out of the way. Okay. Actually about what self-harming is what else can we put in place? You said that great thing about having a word. So if you're a young person and you're at school, find a trusted adult. Now, as you and I know, that's not always easy. It may be through a friend you find a trusted adult. It may be that the first adult you go to doesn't know how to deal with the information and they're actually scared. And sadly, that is reality. I'm not going to make it seem all fluffy and sugarcoat it. So go to another adult. Go to one who listens to you. Or have a good friend that will help you find someone to listen to you. And agree that word. If you feel that it's pain, physical pain, that you want to inflict on yourself, now there's several different ways you can do it. Rather than cutting yourself in any way, how about having an elastic band on your wrist and pinging it? Yeah. Because that's a really good way. So it's an option. It's still allowing you to understand I've got pain, like going on mentally, and doing it. So you can do that. Flick your wristband. Another way is having a pen, because as we said, often when we're doing when the self-harming comes in, it's yes to transfer the physical pain, but also it's a physical sign of saying this is what's going on in my head and I can't verbalize it. So if that's what you need, use a pen. Use a felt tip and mark yourself. Now, when you mark yourself, you then have a choice of how you want to mark yourself. Do you want to give yourself a little bit of love? Is there, favorite animals or something like that? So make a choice. So you're still using something, but you're using something in a nicer way for yourself to show that you've got something going on in your head. And if you want it to be in a black pen with all dark words and that's fine too. No one's telling you that it's got to be light and fluffy. But
before you go on, is there a pen that isn't poisonous to the skin that people could buy? I'm just being logical and practical, because if you're drawing on yourself as a coping mechanism, it might just poison you if you do it too much.
Yes, well, I'd like to think, and I hear what you're saying, one of the words that we try to stay away from is coping mechanism.
Okay.
And
stand to be corrected. You've done the course.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's why we like having these conversations, because that's what this is all about. It's about learning. That's a very valid point, and I am not going to recommend any because I don't know any. But my way of thinking, rightly or wrongly, and someone might pull me up for this, is actually I think it would be better to use the pen, regardless of
absolutely
if you react on it. But I hear you, and maybe that's something, if you know someone who's gifting, maybe you can do that research. And how lovely is that you've researched further for them and said, I found these pens, they're not toxic to you in any way, but
kind act.
And that's a lovely feeling to receive a gift like that. So there's a couple of ways with that. If it's alcohol, I don't know about you, I know that when I'm overstressed, where things have got too much, I'll have alcohol. And there was a time that I'd come home from work, open the fridge, pour a glass of wine, and I'm putting my hand up here and think, oh, that doesn't taste nice. Next thing, the bottle's actually empty.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, I want a nice drink. Does it have to be the wine? Is it the wine you want? How about a nice drink in a lovely glass that isn't necessarily wine?
Yeah.
Or alcohol. And if you're finding that you can't do that even for 48 hours, then maybe you may need additional help. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
Because I've been lucky enough to be in what they call the rooms of AA and NA, and they're actually really welcoming groups. And even if you're not sure, if you go to an open meeting, you're able to go and just find out, do I need extra support? No one will say, get out.
Yeah.
But if you find that you are self-harming yourself with any substance, such as drugs or alcohol, you are able to go there. And if you're somebody who's living with someone who is not coping well with the alcohol, drinks, drugs, did you know you can go to Al-Anon?
Spell that for people.
A-L and then Anon. So Al-Anon, that's for alcohol. That's for friends, family, or anyone around you. You're coping with someone around you. And I say coping, you're trying to look after yourself while they're in that place. So you can go to Al-Anon, which is for alcohol, or you can go to C-Anon, which is for drugs, etc. Again, I'll put some of this information in the comments box for people. But can you see how we've got lots of support around there?
Yeah.
Not for the person, not only for the person that's self-harming, but for the others around those people, because we want to try and do the best that we can, but coming back to that enabling for the right reasons and supporting.
Yeah. I've often been told though, and through my own experiences of obviously working at psychiatric hospital, that you can help and support people who want to help themselves, but if they don't want to help themselves, you really need to step away to protect yourself and to allow them to realize that you will be there, but you're not there to enable them. You're there to help and support them get better and to change. But if you're part of actually enable them in their downward spiral or their lifestyle, that's not a good thing to be doing.
And this is where we look at the word enable, because it's like everything has two sides.
Yeah.
So for instance, alcohol, or anything that someone is doing, if you're getting support for yourself, and then you can see that you're enabling in the best way possible. And I say best way because, as you said, if that person doesn't want help, you can't make them. But what you can do is open the conversation and show by what you're doing. I'm next to you, and I know someone very close to me who's an addict. That person knows I love them, but I'm very clear on my boundaries. And I have to do that for my own self-care.
Yeah.
But that also means that person has a clear message. When they're fully ready to start their journey on recovery, there'll be no judgment, and there is no judgment. But I am also not going to enable the self-harm at the moment.
Yeah. It's hard though, isn't it? None of this is very easy. Hard.
No, it's not. But you know what? By not talking about it, actually, do you remember that isolation that I talked about at the beginning and how harmful that is?
Yeah,
15 times, like more than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So by helping breaking the cycle, and that's what we're all about, to step forward. Yeah. We didn't say any of this would be easy, but also that's why we're having these conversations.
We are. Wow.
Yeah.
Have you got any more myths up your sleeves, Beverley, that need to be busted?
I do. One of the things I'm going to say about, and we spoke about suicide, is the word commit.
Right.
Commit suggests it's an illegal act, that it's an act of crime. And actually, it's not a crime now. What we say is died by or completed. And I'm very careful, and I'm being very aware. You know, I know people that sadly have died by suicide. And I know some people listening here, and it's absolutely earth-shattering. That's why I'm so passionate about opening this. Also, it's men mostly that die by suicide, and that's for 45 years of age and younger, and that those rates are higher than heart attack or cancer.
Do they say why such a high rate of men do complete suicide?
That's not saying that more women don't attempt it, because more women do. Right. However, it's the way they choose, and that's what I'm not going to go into the different ways, because I don't want to glorify it in any way, but it's the methods that they choose. Also, then we can look at some of the things that happen. Look at some of the messages that men are brought up with.
Yeah.
Don't cry, men don't cry, don't be a crybaby. You need to be tougher. I'm not saying women don't have this as well, but in a different way. And these are the societal messages. Yeah. Also, what's important is looking at the economics of where someone's living, about their community, what's around them. You know, are they living in an environment where there's abject poverty? Are they living in an environment where there's no work, no jobs? That's not to say that when we talk about poverty, that just because you're surrounded with money doesn't mean to say you don't have these same thoughts, because you do. But we're talking about the larger majority.
Yeah.
But acknowledging everybody. Also, if you think about traditions, family traditions, and this is where the self-harm can start, expectations.
Yeah.
Not living up to family traditions and expectations.
Yeah.
You know, religious beliefs within the family, whether or not they're yours. You know, this is the family you've been born into. These are our religious beliefs. And also gender, you know, LGBTQ. If you think of, you know, the prejudice and the fear of coming out, and, you know, the acceptability and being marginalised within their own, say, family and family members, it's trying to find a community that's right for them. And that's the same with everybody. We're survivors of abuse. Now, we're not looking to recruit anyone in to join us, but we wouldn't have spoken out for years. And I know I didn't, but as soon as I started, I then wanted to find other survivors.
Other people, that have gone through similar,
Yeah. Not that I don't want to be with people that haven't, because that's not true at all.
Yeah, no.
But I wanted to know that I was normal.
Yeah. And we absolutely are.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, sadly.
And I say sadly, yeah. So there's many different reasons for self-harming, and I'm not saying that anyone who self-harms ends up having suicidal thoughts, and that I need to get clear, because that is a myth as well, and that's where some people get really frightened by it. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's important.
But again, we were talking about spectrums last week, weren't we? And this is, again, another spectrum, and you can find yourself at one end, at the other, in the middle, at different times in your life. And also, as you clearly said, it's all about just removing the pain. You just want the pain to go away. So whatever you're doing, even if it ends up with suicide, you just want the pain to end. So what can we do to help people recognize the pain that they're in, and what can they do to turn that around so that they can lessen the pain, or get out of that pain cycle so that it doesn't lead to self-harm?
Well, hopefully after hearing this podcast, I'm not saying that message is going to come home for everybody, but if at least one person is hearing this, this is a start. And this is where I'm very passionate on this. So, for instance, if you are physically self-harming and cutting yourself, please make sure that you keep any of your injuries well protected for healing. You know, if you find that they're getting really infected, please see somebody, and then they can be bandaged and they can heal. And it's when we see that bandage as well, that actually is also a message about that pain that we're feeling internally. Do you know what? We can also heal that with different steps. And it does start with our self-care. So what can you do? So there's, when we say what can we do, you and I will have something that we do when we're feeling at our lowest, but it's a small thing. So even if I'm feeling not well, I like to clean my teeth. And when I'm cleaning my teeth, I look in the mirror and it makes me feel loved and nurtured because I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I'm loving myself. With yours, you like your physical exercise, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have to have that feeling of the endorphins that make me just feel energized. It just shifts my mood.
Yeah. So even if you're feeling tired, you'll take yourself outside. Yeah. And even if, you know, it doesn't have to be for a long time. It's for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So for anyone, we've gave you some other ideas about snapping the band on your wrist, even having the pens. But think about some other things that can help you change how you're feeling at that time. Make a list. What's your word that you've chosen? Yeah. Who have you spoken about having that word?
Have you communicated it clearly?
Yeah. Can you speak to them? If you can't speak to them, who can you speak to? So if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, do you have the Samaritan's number?
Yeah.
Right by you. And did you know you don't have to just pick up the phone? You can actually access the Samaritans on your mobile phone.
Right. Like chat.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can save Samaritans in your search bar on your phone, and you can email them, but you can do a chat with them as well. Because sometimes that's the way, and it's finding a way that's right for you.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, like I said, so if you've got your crisis box, or I like to say self-care box, because for me, self-care isn't about just doing it when you're in crisis. Yeah. Self-care is about, in our recovery, learning to make it part of our everyday living.
Yeah.
So even as we're talking, I've got water here, so I don't dehydrate. Excuse me.
So obviously there's all these different helplines out there. There is I say go to your GP if you can get an appointment, but they are the gateway to mental health services, unless you can afford to go private. Yeah. But I've even been told today that accessing a psychiatrist privately, you still have to have a GP referral in some instances. Well, which blew my mind, but I know for a fact that you can self-refer to many places if you do have the budget to do that. Yes. So at the end of the day, it's finding that way, which is the hardest. Yeah. It's finding that way to communicate in a different method that you're feeling pain. Yeah. And that you need some support and to find something that works for you for self-care. I know our 30 minutes has probably gone over, but there was one thing I just really wanted to bring up. Sometimes an individual can become so destructive and so demanding on the people around them that have been supporting them, that person who's the supporter just has had enough and just wants out of the relationship because it's toxic. Yeah. What would you say about that to that supporter that maybe feels like they failed the person, but I know what you're going to say anyway, but I just want to clarify what you would say to that supporter who found themselves in that position, and also maybe raising awareness to that person who is going through stuff and may have become in a cycle of what we call victimhood, which we will probably have to discuss another time, but is very demanding of the people that are supporting them. And they need to acknowledge that as well. They need to acknowledge their role in this.
Absolutely. Because, and I've been there as well, you know, I'll put my hands up. I've been here as well in different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
When we come to talk about self-care, that includes boundaries. And when we talk about boundaries, you know, when you're on an aeroplane and they talk about that oxygen mask.
Yeah.
And they say, put that on first before you put it on your children or anyone else. And I used to think years ago, no, I'm putting it on my children first. I didn't understand what it meant. Now I understand it. If you're putting all your energy into looking after somebody else and you're not looking after you, then what happens is you become ill or affected by that, or the oxygen mask, you don't have any oxygen. So by putting the oxygen mask on yourself, you can then help as many people as you want. That comes into the same way. So if you have been supporting somebody and they just don't want to help themselves, or the environment's so toxic and it's not right for you, then you can actually disengage. But make sure you've given the information to that person. And you'll see them in a week's time, in a month's time, in 6 months' time. But get support for yourself too, as I said about, you know, Al-Anon. You know, anyone, you know, we know that we may be survivors of sexual abuse, but being close to someone who's a survivor, they may need support as well. They've got understanding. You know, we're in relationships with different people. You know, sometimes it becomes too intense for them. They need support, and it's okay. If we all have support, we then become interdependent, not codependent on each other. And what we're not doing is putting everyone before ourselves, and we need to keep ourselves well. So if something's toxic, then we need to remove. But there are still ways of removing. And I'm not saying, not going to sugarcoat it, it's not always easy. But we have to think about that as well.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. And what about the person that's maybe not aware that they're in the loop of being destructive? How do they break the cycle? Obviously getting support.
If they're not aware. If they're not aware. No. And that's the sad thing. So that's why we started this talk about self-harm, because you can see it. It's a physical sign. Okay. It's a physical sign when someone's drinking. You can see that someone's drinking. You can see that someone's really unhappy. And when I'm saying drinking, I'm not saying the occasion, but they're really unhappy. They're harming themselves. They're putting themselves in danger. And I think that's the key thing. But you can only have that conversation and let them go. Like this person that's close to me. I can love them. I can open the conversation, but I can't make them do something.
It's that analogy, isn't it? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
So my gifts tend to be about wellness. A bit like your pens that you were thinking of. You know, I mean, that's a really good idea. But can you imagine that gift? How blessing, how lovely is that? Beverley, we've got to draw it to a close, I'm afraid, because I think we've gone over our 30 minutes as per usual. Any lasting thoughts that you want to send out on this podcast? I just want to send out to anybody who is listening to this and you find yourself self-harming, or suddenly realise, oh, maybe I have been self-harming myself in ways I hadn't realised, is that you're not alone. Okay, there's nothing to feel shameful for or guilty for. Please reach out for support. And as I said, if the first person that you reach out to is unable to support you, and it may be through their own fear, please reach out again to someone else.
thank you very much for all of your wisdom in today's podcast. And we would love to hear from people, and we would love to hear their comments on what we've said. And we would love to hear about future topics that people want covered as well. Now you can say what you would like to say.
Well, I was going to say, Chris, what about your last thoughts?
Yeah, a bit of a heavy one, I think, but really important to draw attention to it, as it is an issue for some people. It is some people's realities, and to break the taboo around that, all of that silence that may make people feel ashamed, guilty, responsible, to take all of that away and just reach out for the help that they need.
Yeah. Right. So look forward to speaking to you on the next podcast, Chris. And goodbye to everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.